Welcome to the Winter Speaks podcast. I'm your host, Winter, and I am wanting to do a little explainer about how we win in different states, specifically the three main categories of different kinds of states. And so we need to start by defining our definitions, and those three states are called the swing states or battleground states. Red states or safe Republican states, and blue states, aka Democratic states, or states that all go blue. The way we campaign in each one of these states is completely different. And so I think it's really crucial for us to kind of define what each of these states are and what it means, and how each progressive campaign should be different in each of these states. A swing state would be like Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe in some circumstances Pennsylvania, especially presidential, but I'm not talking presidential, I'm talking congressional races, and then other states as well, Nevada, etc. And then red states, you think of Texas, you think of any red state, Tennessee, especially. I think Afton Bain, we could learn a lot from her campaign for Tennessee's 7th district, I believe, back in 2025. And so, and then I like to compare other progressive state races, like there were a couple seats that we flipped in Texas that was really, really incredible to see last year in a special election. I forget his name now, so forgive me, but he's a state senator, and I think his campaign's another campaign to look at. Of course, Afton Bain, like I said, and others that we should look at and be like, oh my gosh, we need to like copy what they did. And so a lot of my talking points are coming from those campaigns as well. So let's get into it. Okay, and so here's my concrete definitions of what it means to be a swing state, blue state, a red state. I kind of repeated this earlier. My definitions are swing states, states that could go either way for Republicans or Democrats. And then blue states are states that typically go for Democrats in most elections, and in red states, basically the same thing, states that typically go for Democrats in most elections. I think that's just common sense, definitions. It's, everybody understands what they are, so pretty cut and clear there. So for a swing state, reason why I want to talk about a swing state first is because we watched the Wisconsin primaries last night with Francesca Hong, and so I thought let's start with a swing state, right? It makes sense. My first point is that you need to reassure Democrat voters that you can win. In swing states, Democrat voters are worried about viability and whether you can win against a Republican, right? And in a place like Wisconsin, they currently have a senator that's a Republican, Ron Johnson, I believe is his name. And then you have Tony Evers, who's a Democratic governor in Wisconsin, and then the legislature is also controlled by Republicans, and so like swing states can swing either or, and so Democrat voters are often worried about viability. And if you don't reassure them that you can win, then it's going to be hard for the Democrat electorate to be like, oh my gosh, we're scared to vote for you, even though we agree with your points and your policies, but can you win? And so you have to make that a point in your campaign to reassure Democratic voters. Secondly, you need to build a coalition, progressives, socialists, whatever you're running as in a Democratic Party, or whatever label you want to label yourself. You need a diverse and broad coalition of both moderates and progressives. And I saw a lot of like Hudson Parker went to campaign for Hong. I saw DSA, involved in Hong's campaign, which was great. She came really, really close, but I think something that was lacking is the lack of not moderating her policies necessary. I'm not calling for that. I'm calling for a coalition, building a coalition with people who aren't considered, you know, progressive or moderate. I didn't see a lot of moderates really backing Hong, and so I found that as an issue. Um, if she was able to persuade some of her more moderate folks and especially elected officials to back her, then I think it would have been a better result for us. And you need a coalition in a swing state. You just do. It's not like a blue state, and we'll go into blue states. So that's my second point. My third point is focus on present day issues facing your state district or your constituency, which is your voters. We saw a lot of talk about 2020 and her past, abolish the police or abolish prisons, and people questioned her on DSA, right? And so, if she got ahead of that early, um, she might have had the ability to kind of get around that. But that didn't really start until later in the campaign during the debates and all the questions and everything about that. And so I felt like she needed more time to kind of like separate herself from the 2020 version of herself versus what office she's running now and in 2026. And so focus on what's happening now early, and get around that. And that goes into my third point. Address any controversial old beliefs early and take either accountability or run with it. Those are your two options. Either you say, look, that's not what I believe anymore. It's not 2020 anymore. My views have changed over time. Take accountability and tell voters why you've changed your mind and what made you change your mind. Talk about how, like, I like this argument that Hong used about defunding the police. Even if she wanted to, she can't because the governor doesn't have the power herself to defund the police. And so I like that answer. Even if she wanted to, she can't. And so that reassures voters, like, oh, even if there's a Republican um, legislature, she can't defund the police by herself. But a lot of that, came way later, and it should have, started way earlier, in my opinion. And then finally, you need a strong social media game. Hong kind of had a good social media game. It wasn't, Sapar, or I would say Abdul Sayed had a better social media game than Hong did, but making sure you have a strong social media game, strong communications team to back you up. I know that there was a political article that came out about how she wanted to change communications up and mass communications and making sure that she has a team that can defend her really well. And I'm really sad that she didn't get more time to be able to do that. And she said that, or in Politico, it said that if she would have won the primary, that's one of her primary goals was to amp up her team, get more Democratic insiders in, and people who could help revamp her whole team. And so making sure you have a good communications team is key. And then you need to meet voters where they are. She did a lot of that, a lot of rallies and stuff like that. But making sure it's not just Hong here. You got to make sure you're meeting voters where they're at. While you're not just running a online campaign. Kai Newkirk, who ran in Arizona, he's an example of an online campaign. He had a lot of support online, but it didn't transcribe into real life organizing. And so I found that kind of as an issue. And so, there are a bunch of people that I've support over this 2026 season, but have ran a extremely online campaign. And so you need to make sure you're not only uh, having a good social media game, but also a real life, and vice versa. Making sure you're also have a good social media game and not just a good ground game. And so it's goes hand in hand. You need both in this modern age. So that's how I kind of view swing states primaries and winning primaries in swing states. Next up, we got red states. And when I think about red state campaigns, I think of James Tallarico, I think of Afton Bain, or Ben. I think of a guy named Taylor in Texas. I can't remember his name. He won a special election in the state senate, I believe, last year. Um, what other good red state campaigns? Beta O'Rourke in the past. Now James Tallarico. Um, they both are running, or they both ran awesome campaigns, especially in the primaries. And so we can learn from these progressive campaigns in states like Texas. So let's get into it. First of all, phrase progressive policy in a general way. And I want to give examples of this on James Tallarico's website. And let me show you what I mean. So James Tallarico says we need it's time to take our fight for guaranteed health care to our nation's capital. I like that. It's simple. It's concise. It doesn't say single payer. It doesn't say Medicare for all. It doesn't say like or a public option specifically. He later goes into what he means, but this quote in of itself is like very broad, like we need guaranteed health care. And so like um being general and um attracts people more than being very specific on policy. So you can say universal healthcare without saying universal healthcare is basically what I'm saying. And so James Tallarico, just using this quote in general is a great example. Let's continue. Now, when you scroll down on his healthcare policy or his healthcare stance, he says, quote, allow every American, regardless of their age, to join Medicare. Provide an affordable, not-for-profit healthcare option for every American, which also while also bringing down costs for those who don't participate by increasing competition with private insurance, which is how I personally um, view a lot of these um, policies that I call social democratic, or you can call it socialist. Some people call it social democratic, some people call it socialist. Whatever, I'm not going to argue about what it is or is not. Whatever. Um, but like it's a great way of not saying Medicare for all, but saying Medicare for all. You get my gist? Like there's a way to market policies without um sounding super uber like socialist or progressive and making that sound like, oh, I still want competition, like the I still believe in the free market and competition, which is basically capitalism, right? And so like it doesn't scare voters being like, oh, he's a scary socialist that isn't electable, right? And so it's a new way of communicating your policies, and I think that is super important. And so his, I love how he's marketing his policies. And so that's just one example of a progressive campaign and how to market your policies on in a red state like Texas. So let's go down my other points. Okay, and then my second point is you need a strong ground game in urban centers of your state district. Typically, you need a strong field director, which is a position inside political campaigns. I've been around a lot of field directors, and I've seen them and their work. It's a really hard job, but in red states, Texas, that's Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, these big urban centers of Texas, um, that's typically a progressive's um, strong areas in a Democratic primary. And so I'm focusing on those urban centers where it's the most diverse, more blue voters live. Those are the areas where red states, or excuse me, red state progressive campaigns should focus on. Is those urban areas for Democratic primaries, but also not abandoning rural Democrats as well. Um, but yeah, and so that's the like go to, and so that's what Tallarico focused a lot on his primary is in those areas. Dallas was more Jasmine Crockett's area, and then I believe the like Houston area was more Tallarico's stronghold, but focusing. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But focusing on those urban areas is really crucial for progressive campaigns in red states. Um, you saw the same thing with Afton Bain in Tennessee, in the seventh district there. And so that's that urban areas centers. And then my next point is you need to build a strong multiracial, multi-generational, socio-economic campaign of support. So in red states are actually not red states. They're very gerrymandered. They are very voter suppressed states. Um, a lot of minority groups live in these states, and so building a multiracial and multi-generational, now young and old, black, white, all different groups, and then also socio-economic. So making sure you put working people front center of your campaign as well, and people all over the spectrum, and making sure they're the face of your campaign. Those are the people that count, and those are the people that will also, if you can attract other party members with your policies, then focusing on the socio-economic, multi-generational, and the diverse part of your campaign, you can attract people from all sorts of different areas of life to your campaign. So that's also really important. um, Also, be mindful of who endorses your race or your campaign. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, Bernie's gonna endorse. Bernie's gonna go rally. AOC should rally," and that's up to Tallarico, right? I've been using Tallarico a lot because he's a great guy, and I love how he's running his campaign. So he's gonna be my person I talk a lot about because I love his primary so much. So be mindful of who endorses your campaign, who you have endorsed, who you have rallied for you. Um, and um, and so yes, I do want Bernie and AOC and all these people to go campaign for James Tallarico, but again, it's up to Tallarico and his opinion on what he thinks will help him going forward. So I know it's past the primaries in Texas, and so that's not necessarily a thing for that anymore. He's got past the primaries, but now the general election, it's up to him whether he wants to bring in Bernie or AOC to campaign for him. I know that Bernie went to the Texas Democratic convention, which was really really cool to see. Them kind of bringing him in and bringing in the most popular senator in this country. It's kind of a big deal. So kudos to Texas Democrats. And then again, reassure Democratic voters that you are the person to beat Republicans, right? In this sense, it's not like a swing state where you have to tell Democrats, "Oh, you're the best person to beat Republicans," and stuff. Where Democratic voters are scared that it could go Republican, and so they're constantly in this fight or flight mode about whether they can trust whether you can beat the Republican or whether they can, Democrats can trust that you're going to keep it Democratic. And so, in this sense, it's a little bit different. This time, you need to be focused on beating Republicans, right? Because it's typically a Republican stronghold, especially Texas. And so, again, I'm using Tallarico's campaign as an example. And so, making sure that you're reassuring Democratic voters that you are the person to beat, whoever you're up against. In this case, it's Ken Paxton. Um, and so again, making sure you reassure Democratic voters that you're the guy or the person that can beat the Republicans is really important as well. And then finally, focus on economic well-being and populism, and that's what a lot of what James Tallarico is focusing on is on economic policies and making people's lives more affordable. I think that is one of the key ways in red states to win on those policies, because even Republicans in red states you know, they're hurting because of Trump, and so making that the front and center policy of yours in a campaign is really, really great and really good, and that economic populism can also attract right leaning populists as well. And so if you're campaigning from a left wing populist standpoint, but yeah, and so that is my kind of swing state kind of little um tidbit about how you win a primary in a red state. So a little bit different than a swing state, but there are some similarities. Now let's go to a blue state. Blue state has a bunch of different points in there. So let's go to blue state, shall we? Okay, organizing in a blue state for progressive campaigns. Um, some of the blue states have been the most frustrating parts of the primary season in 2026. So, um, and you'll know why. So my first point with a blue state is organize, organize, organize. In blue states, you have so many great organizations to organize with. Uh, more and more organizations are being created every day. Utilize them. I'm talking about our revolution. I'm talking Medicare for all groups. I'm talking DSA, Working Families Party, Progressive Victory, who I love, and then the Sunrise Movement, Gen Z for Change, all these great groups that are there to help you organize. So organize, organize, organize with these groups is crucial. It's how you build a strong ground game and field game. So use those groups. These groups are also in red states and swing states too. But in blue states, if you want to go against some powerful people, in these blue states, utilize those organizations, unions, labor, um, organizations, what have you. Utilize them. They're there for a reason, especially if you are progressive with progressive policies. So make sure you utilize your organizations, unions, and organizations that can help you win. My second point is unite around one candidate. God damn it. I cannot tell you how many times we could have won, including in Wisconsin probably, and Illinois, and California, and all these places where you have multiple different progressives running against each other. I cannot tell you how many progressive have lost simply because too many people were on the ballot. So once you figure, typically online and also on the ground, you can kind of get an idea, but also polling isn't the best, blah, 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 blah. So whoever is the best candidate, the best progressive in a race, coalesce around that person. It makes the whole world better. It makes the whole ground game better. Just do it. Um, and so I cannot tell you how important that is, and how many races we could have won if we coalesced and got around one candidate. And then my third point is run on real issues impacting your state or county or um, district. Go full out, name the policies you want, and why the Democratic Party isn't meeting the moment. If you want to go that route, and be as left wing as you want, right? You're allowed to be as annoying left winger as you want in blue states. Um, you don't have to worry about anybody else, and so you're free to do that in blue states. And then my last point is have a great ground game, which includes social media, field organizing, volunteer operations, go to events, and be in the community. Um, you know, and this is one point where I'm like, you need to have this in red state progressive campaigns and also swing state campaigns, right? This is one talking point that is similar to other areas of the country, right? This is just something that's common everywhere that you need everywhere. And so have a good ground game, field organizing game, and social media game. Making sure you're not just on social media though. A good field organizing, good canvassing, phone banking, volunteer game, volunteer operations, and then go to events, go to Pride events in June, or go to multiple or go to community events everywhere. It doesn't matter what it is, and meet people where there are. So yeah, that is kind of my little just on blue states. And so yeah, I wanted to create this because I was just like frustrated what happened in Wisconsin, and so I'm just like, you know what? I've seen and volunteered on and worked on multiple different campaigns. I've seen what works and what doesn't, and every election cycle changes, right? What works one election cycle doesn't necessarily always work for the next 2 years or for the next election cycle. One of the election cycle, for an example, in 2024 was more red, and so what would work this year wouldn't necessarily might not work in 2024, and so the situation is always changing. But my point still stands. A lot of these stay the same throughout. Doesn't matter what year it is. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have still, and I hope this helps. If you have a different strategy, feel free to comment. And say what is your strategy in a blue state, red state, and swing state. How is it different than mine? Um, so yeah, I'm curious. So I would love to hear your feedback. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for tuning in.